All righty. Hello, everyone. We should be beaming up here in a moment. There we go. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. We have a great program lined up for you this evening. But before we get to that, I have just a few announcements to go over and some general housekeeping. If you have questions at any time, please just leave them in the chat or in the comment section, and we will get to them as soon as we can. First off, I'd like to start by introducing myself. My name is Jennifer Wick, and I am the Public Program Specialist with the Champaign County Forest Preserve District. I am based out of the Homer Lake Interpretive Center, which is located at Homer Lake Forest Preserve, which is located in Homer, Illinois, which is just about 15 miles east of Champaign-Urbana. And the Interpretive Center is actually currently open to the public. We are open Tuesday through Friday from 1 to 5 p.m. We are enforcing current public health guidelines, so masks and distancing and all that is required. But you can visit our website or our Facebook page for more information about what to expect if you're planning a visit. Now, Homer Lake Forest Preserve is just one of 7 forest preserves in the Champaign County Forest Preserve District. And you can visit ccfpd.org for more information about where our preserves are located and what our current open hours are. Also, be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to stay up to date with what's happening. And tonight we are so excited to host Jamie Ellis and talk about early spring wildflowers that can be found in this region. And we have perfect timing for this. If you've visited any of the preserves lately or any natural area or just even looked outside at all, no doubt have you realized that everything is really greening up and starting to burst back to life after what seemed like a very long winter. And one of the most exciting things about the springtime is that there's almost something new happening every week. So whether it's wildflowers or wildlife, there's always something new going on. And it's exciting because it happens throughout the whole season. And for tonight's program, we're going to be taking a closer look at some of the more common spring wildflowers that can be found in this region. And like I said, we're joined by Jamie Ellis. So Jamie is a botanist with the Illinois Natural History Survey, and he's currently employed as the Natural Areas Coordinator. Jamie is very familiar with Midwest flora as well as plant communities, habitats, and fauna throughout the state, and we're really honored to have him tonight as our guest. If you have any questions for the program, again, just drop those in the comments. If you have questions for Jamie or for myself or just questions in general, we will answer them at some point during the program. And there'll also be time at the end of the presentation for more programs or more questions, excuse me. And without further ado, I am going to hand things over to Jamie.
Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer, and thank you very much for inviting me here tonight to talk about plants because I love plants, and as Jennifer mentioned, I am the Natural Areas Coordinator for the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where I and one other coworker manage and maintain about 1,000 acres of mostly forested properties. At about 10 sites set aside for teaching and research in the biological, ecological, and other sciences. I've been doing that since 2016, but before that, from 1999 to 2016, I was a botanist with a project at the Illinois Natural History Survey called the Critical Trends Assessment Program, where I was responsible for vegetation surveys and forest wetlands and grasslands all around the state of Illinois. So I am familiar with plants and habitats across the great state of Illinois. I don't know everything, but I will do my best to tell you about some wildflowers that you're going to encounter in central Illinois as you get outside. So tonight, I'm going to give some context for the habitats in Illinois, looking across our landscape. I'll briefly look at some of the historic context and current land cover of Illinois. I'll just start with an introduction on how to go about identifying plants, including some words about field guides on the web, and some new technology with phone apps. And then I'll spend the majority of the time tonight talking about some common and some not so common spring wildflowers in Central Illinois. So we're going to try to make this in a local context of East Central Illinois. And then I'll finish with some lists of places to go, not an exhaustive list by any means, but some public places where you can get out and see some of these wildflowers. So when one thinks about Illinois, and let's see. Oh, there we go. When I was pushing buttons, the screen wasn't advancing, and there it goes. Right, of course, in general, when we think of our home state of Illinois, or we're telling others about Illinois, right, we think of our urban and suburban context. Of course, we do live in the agricultural Midwest, and so this landscape is all around us right now. So for plants in Illinois, right, maybe we only need to know corn and soy, or maybe this little beauty that's coming up in many yards right now, and it may be vexing, but it is providing pollen and nectar for bees and adding a splash of color in our neighborhoods. But I will go on to mostly talk about native wildflowers tonight. So even in our midst of our urban and agricultural landscape of Illinois is biologically diverse, and scientists and researchers have classified more than 93 different types of habitats across the state, and those habitats provide homes for more than 54,000 species of plants and animals. And of course, my focus is on the plants. So in Illinois, there are about 3,000 species of vascular plants. So a lot to know and to find and see. We are the prairie state. Historically, Illinois was this vast native grassland, as you'll see on the image there, that sort of goldish, tannish, yellowish color. It wasn't just this, as the picture shows, sort of monolithic grasses, but it really was this rich and diverse mosaic from dry to wet of wildflowers, and grasses. And our rivers and streams and wetlands and forests, and you can see the major river valleys of the Illinois and the Kaskaskia and the other major river valleys. And then when you get into the southern part of the state, that was mostly forested. Of course, as I mentioned, today we live in this vast agricultural landscape where now most of the state is in row crops in agricultural production, but it is in those special areas, those areas that are been protected or preserved or being managed or restored, in our bits of forest and wetland and prairie that we do so treasure for our own well-being, where we can seek out the botanical diversity. And so we'll jump into, now we're going to jump into a little bit more focus on the plants and a little bit on ID. There's whole college courses covered on how to identify plants. So how do I know what I'm looking at? Well, I fall back on the tried and true. I like books, and there are many books out there, because that's what I learned from. I learned from the books. I learned from people. But when you're picking up a field guide, so right here you can have it in your hand and carry it with you if you would like, for some of these, but then I will get those questions. Okay, Jamie, what field guides, what books do you suggest? I'm like, well, it depends, right? What what does it cover? And what do I mean by that? Are there specific groups of plants? Does it cover specific habitats? What's the geographic range? You know, there's some great wildflower books for other states and other parts of the country that might not be very useful here in Illinois. But you know, the wildflowers of Indiana and Michigan flora, and you know, the flora of Missouri. Yes, of course, we do have, you know, have overlap. And what does it show me? Is it going to be a book that has photographs, has, you know, some sort of illustrations or line drawings? I like picture books. I like pictures. I want to see it. Line drawings are the best. Good photographs are the next best. But then, of course, then you can get into technical keys that are just words, right? But then that's another whole level of knowledge and vocabulary. So looking at those photographs and line drawings to, you know, to at least help you get to some sort of name. And what about you know, how are these plants described? You know, you can have the picture, but then, you know, what are the descriptions that go along with it? Is it just a few words, or are there paragraphs? Does it tell you when it, you know, when it blooms, where it grows, what habitats to find, you know, and maybe other interesting tidbits of information, and also ease of use. What are you most comfortable with? Do you want a dichotomous key? Do you want one that's, you know, that classifies, you know, by season or by flower color, you know? And so what's going to suit you? And then also any good flora or plant ID book, they're gonna tell you, you know, what they cover and how they cover it, and also a glossary of terms, because there are technical terms that a field guide might use, and you need to be able to look those up and say, what is this author talking about, and what sort of key or flower finder, because it's gonna send you to a name, and just a little bit on plant names. So all of these names, whether it's a common name or a scientific name, you know, using those Greek and Latin root words, it's an artificial system. You know, somebody made it up, but there really was one person that started it, this Carlos Linnaeus, and our systematics of naming. So it's an artificial system. You can call, you know, and the plant whatever name you want, but it's when you go to it's when Jennifer and I talk about, you know, spring beauty or Virginia bluebells, you know, so we each know what we're talking about. Or if I, you know, what is right, the difference between Quercus macrocarpa and Florkia proserpinicoides, right? And then you can start saying, oh, well, we don't have to have it right there in front of us to know what we're talking about. So we can use these things as a way to communicate and relate and systematize. So don't be. I am going to use some scientific names because that's how I communicate as well. So you'll see that as we go through through the talk. But then so here's some, you know, some of these that I've used that I like. You know, here's right, prairie plants from the University of Wisconsin-Madison Arboretum. Peterson has an amazing line of field guides. You know, something that also another, you know, region specific, group habitat specific with tallgrass prairie wildflowers, or just something just in general, Illinois wildflowers, or in a nearby state of Indiana, or one that I started with, actually Newcomb's wildflower guide. But realizing that he was from, New England. So it is a very Northeast United States kind of bias in that book, but it covers a lot of our wildflowers as well. And then, of course, right, and then you can go into the actual floras. There's no pictures in Dr. Molenbrock's Vascular Flora of Illinois, but he does have keys and description of all the plants in the state. And then with a lot of the guides, you're gonna run into some botanical terminology, and I'm just throwing this out. I'm not teaching botanical terminology, tonight, but it's something for you to look into it as, if you run into these descriptions like, oh, what's the difference between a petal, and a sepal, and what's the the shape of the flower, or the the type of flower arrangement on there. How's that going to help me describe this, or read descriptions and get to a name and figure out what I'm talking about. And leaves, the whole vocabulary of leaves. I'm actually just going to point out one thing here that I think is very helpful, besides when you're looking at wildflowers, and you're going to look at, what's the color, how many petals, what's the arrangement, but also looking at the leaves and leaf arrangement of a plant it's really important, particularly opposite and alternate. Most plants in our region have alternate leaves. So if you find something that has opposite leaves, right, this that cues you into a smaller group of plants, to go through to try to figure out what you're looking at. And so we're just so just to sort of whet your appetite, hopefully, to learn some terms. And then when we're looking up information nowadays, right? We still, many of us can pull books off the shelf, and that's very, very comforting. But also, it's so easy to go on the web, and I am not even going to even scratch the surface of when you type in, a search, for toothwort, or Virginia bluebells. But I'm going to show you a local one. We actually have, some of you may have run across this Illinois Wildflowers website. It's actually built and curated by John Hilty, who is local. He lives right in Urbana, Illinois, and he's built this really great website with some great pictures and descriptions. You won't necessarily, and then you can go into something more technical, like the USDA has the USDA plants database, which is a comprehensive database, of plants in across the United States, or something a little bit more regional with the Missouri Botanical Garden, and they're great too, because they're going to help you find native plants and our non-native species, but then also some of our horticultural and gardening species as well, or some of the Ladybird Johnson wildflower center. So there's great resources on the web to utilize. And then I haven't used any phone apps. I'm going to be bluntly honest with you, because I learned how to use the field guides in the books, and I've learned all these plant names before phone apps. So I'm the Luddite in the room tonight. But as I'm talking to folks, and going and looking at the web, saying, okay, what's out there? So there are these apps. They're good. They're not foolproof. Something like PlantNet and PlantSnap are using your phone's camera and AI and algorithms to try to do some matching and figuring it out. And it's going to show you different pictures, saying, does it look like this or this and this? So it's going to get there. The one that I hear more people talk about is iNaturalist, because that's really more of a crowdsourced app that where I think you probably with some time you're going to get a better result. If you post a picture, and you're going to get feedback from a lot of different people, and also experts as well, who can say, "Oh, I know what that is," and they'll help you out um, with the name. So if there's others, and I'd appreciate if folks say, "Oh, these are great," or "These are awful." So yeah, let us know what are good ways to identify plants in the field from that little magic box we carry in our pocket. So tonight, spring wildflowers. What am I going to go over? So I'm going to show you some pictures and names, and I'm going to keep talking. So really, I'm going to focus on herbaceous plants. Some things with some showy flowers that you can see, because there are a lot of trees and shrubs flowering right now. But consulting with my family and coworker, I think oak trees and the staminate catkins on oaks are fascinating, but they don't make great pictures. And so we're going to concentrate on some herbaceous plants and some showy flowers that you'll find on the forest floor, and really in this March, April, May. That's what I'm saying with spring. In Central Illinois, there's going to be some very common plants in Central Illinois, but they also extend to regions outside this area as well. And then also, we tend to think of woods and going out in the woods in the spring for our spring wildflowers in forests. But I am going to show you some a couple wetland species, and also some prairie species that are great spring bloomers. So let's jump in. And the first one right here is one of our earliest in the spring, and it's purposefully small in that photograph because you unless there's great carpets of it, and usually there's not great carpets of it, is this very little species, the harbinger of spring, or also sometimes called salt and pepper, because it has these dark colored stamens and white petals. It's a little mustard. It has those 4 little white petals, and it is very, very small, only a few inches tall. It is one of our very earliest native wildflowers in forests across Central Illinois. And you can find it as early as in February. Right now, it's done. It's as of today, it's done blooming. It's set fruit, and it's going to fade away too. One of our true spring ephemerals, and I'll mention that as well. Another one of my absolute favorites is the snow trillium. This is a species that's it's not rare, but it's not common. Or it's not uncommon either. If you're looking for it in the right places, it prefers these in these forest, on in these oak hickory woods, and particularly on slopes and upper slopes and hillsides, and um, and bluff tops. It's a beautiful little trillium, right? That's 6 to 8 inches tall. But once again, you have to be out early, to see this one. Hepatica, or also sometimes called liver leaf. This is also one of our early spring bloomers, right, late March into early April, and you can see the this sort of brownish reddish leaf where it gets its common name, liver leaf. And this plant has a great strategy for getting some energy, right? Plants, need to get some sunlight, to make their own food using the energy of the sun. And these leaves actually they stay evergreen through the winter. There are these, three three-lobed, kind of leathery leaves, and these have actually been on the forest floor all winter long. And so when the snow melts and the ground starts to warm, it's going to start making food, to fuel these beautiful little flowers here, and then these leaves will fade away, and a new leaf will grow, through the springtime. So a lot of times I use the term spring wildflowers, and I define that March, April, May, and then you'll hear a lot of people talk about the spring ephemeral. So I want to just define that for what I'm talking about. Right, these are plants that grow, flower, set seed, and senesce, meaning that they actually their growing parts fade back. I mean, their whole above ground life cycle, happens in 6 to 8 weeks in the spring. Here are these woodland wildflowers, or these spring wildflowers that are taking advantage, particularly in forested settings, of the warmth, the good soil moisture, but also that time before the trees leaf out, and then the forest is shaded, for the rest of the growing season. And so when I say spring ephemeral, these are ones like spring beauty right now. There are some areas, even in some old cemeteries and lawns, you can see carpets of these white to white pink flowers, and they have these little fleshy strap like leaves, which they are in they're in a family that's also related to the purslanes, which can be used as salad greens. So these are perfectly edible if you know what you're looking at and identifying, and you have permission. Don't just go out and start nibbling on the wildflowers. And so and so they're gonna be faded. They're gonna they're actually today I was out, and they were setting seed and fruit. There's still lots of flowers out there, but by within the next few weeks, they're gonna completely fade away and just be roots under the ground for most of the year. Same way with toothwort. Once again, another plant in the mustard family. You can see those 4 little white petals, and also a salad green, but with a caveat, right? Know what you're know what you've got, whether it's edible or not. Don't just go out there and start nibbling unless you're with somebody, or if you're sure what this is. But it's in the mustard family, so it's going to provide that little pepperiness to your spring salad. The trout lily, so named because you see these green, these strap-like leaves with those sort of speckles that remind you of the sides of some species of trout. And here we have our what's most common in our woods here in East Central Illinois is the white trout lily. A lot of times you'll see hundreds or maybe even thousands of the leaves, but maybe only a few flowers. They send down these. They have some very deep roots, and that some people who've actually dug them up tell me that are reminiscent of this dog's tooth. So sometimes you also hear it called dog tooth. Violet as well as trout lily. And once again, this is one of our true spring ephemerals. If you are in some moist woods, and particularly floodplain forest, there are great swaths of Virginia bluebells blooming right now, and they just started blooming. So it's a really great time to get out and see Virginia bluebells along any of our major river systems in East Central Illinois. If you're along the Sangamon or the Umbro, or the Middle Fork system, or maybe the Kaskaskia, you hopefully you'll be able to get out and find Virginia bluebells. Keeping with spring ephemerals, some of my favorites. A very common species across many woodlands in central Illinois and throughout the oak woodlands of the Midwest is the Dutchman's breeches here, right? They look like little 18th century men's breeches upside down, of course. So these ones are very common, and they're in full bloom right now. They'll in another month they'll be completely gone. They'll be retreated underground. And another very closely related species to keep your eye out for, because this one, where Dutchman's breeches is very common, the squirrel corn is not very common. And if you're familiar with the garden variety bleeding hearts, so these are in the same family as bleeding hearts. And so the squirrel corn will look like little white bleeding hearts. These flowers. The foliage are very similar. These segments on these sort of lacy fern-like leaves are a little bit wider, a little bit more robust on the squirrel corn compared to the Dutchman's breeches. But really look for the flowers. And what I found, when also I've seen it, the ants move around the seeds of these species, and particularly squirrel corn, and I find them a lot of times right up against dead logs, like you'll see here, where ants have probably moved the seeds. You might be wondering also about the name. Both Dutchman's breeches and squirrel corns have these. Actually, they're fairly shallowly rooted, and they have these little corms, or not corms, tubers. Sorry about that, using the wrong botanical term. So these little tuberous, these thickened little roots. And so on the Dutchman's breeches, they're kind of pink or reddish in color, and on the squirrel corn, they are yellow. They remind you of kernels of corn. Now, I'm not sure what the squirrel relation is, besides that squirrels eat corn, but squirrels, I've never seen squirrels eat squirrel corn. So somebody correct me if I'm wrong. If you're in sort of some moist woods, some wet woods, you can look for spring crests. Once again, another mustard, right? Nice white petals here. These 4 petals, the cardamine bulbosa, and then one of my favorites, which as of today is done flowering, is the bloodroot. And with this great show of white petals, and you can see these very very distinctive sort of flat lobed leaves, and yes, it is in the poppy family. And so if you would happen to break a stem on accident, or I don't suggest ever digging one up, but if I can trust me that the sap is red, it's bright red. It's not blood red, but that's where it gets its name. Be careful with it, being in the poppy family, right? There's there are some toxic compounds that may irritate your skin. And so now we're moving into things that are not true spring ephemerals, even though that bloodroot, these flowers only last for a day or a couple of days, but these leaves will continue to grow into the summer, and sometimes get as big as dinner plates. Now ones that even sometimes I go out in the woods and I confuse myself, because here's two closely related species. One that's called Rue Anemone with these nice delicate white flowers, right? And you can find carpets of them on the floor, and the false Rue Anemone. I find that the false Rue Anemone in some of our forests in East Central Illinois is a little bit more common, and you might encounter that more often, right? They're both in the Buttercup family, but so lots of stamens, 5 white petals. Well, there's six there, so sometimes the plants, they don't read the keys to know what they're how they're supposed to grow. So you'll have to roll with the punches there. But I have to remind myself, like, oh, is that Rue Anemone? Is that false Rue Anemone? Well, when you're looking at it, if we look at the Rue Anemone here, it has this a delicate little stem that comes up off the forest floor a few inches, and then you're going to have this whorl of leaves where you have the stems of the leaves, and the leaves and a few flowers, and the flower stems come from more or less one point on the stem. Whereas you look over here at the false Rue Anemone, and you follow that stem up, you can find there's leaves and a few flowers that come off different points of that stem. So you can differentiate if you're looking at this Rue Anemone or false Rue Anemone. Once again, in rich woods and in oak hickory forests, you can find both of these species. A relatively easy spring wildflower to identify, and one that a lot of people do know is the mayapple. It's very, very distinctive with these large umbrella like leaves. Sometimes 8 to 10 inches across, and they can be 10 to 12 inches tall, and then also form large colonies, right? They these rhizomatous species that can spread out by their roots. As of today, they're in bud, but over the next week or so, then a lot of times you'll see the ones with this where they fork, where they'll have 2 leaves on each stem, and then that's usually where that single flower is born. So I'm putting here a picture of a large flowered trillium, even though that this is an uncommon trillium here in our East Central Illinois. They can be found in some areas along the Sangamon River corridor, but I mean this is a pretty brilliant wildflower. A lot of times, if you head a bit farther north and east into some of our maybe maple forests and beech maple forest, if you're heading into Indiana or Ohio, or going up to Michigan or Wisconsin, then you'll run into a lot more of the trillium. Grandiflorum, and sometimes find woods where there's hundreds of these white flowers. They're hard to find here in East Central Illinois, but being a trillium, right, here's there's the distinctive 3 leaves here and the 3 white petals on this upright flower. And so if you find that, then you definitely found something something special, at least here in East Central Illinois. The purple trillium, or the wake robin, or the prairie trillium, there's multiple common names for what I call and my colleagues call Trillium recurvatum. This is our common trillium with this distinctive single stalk and these 3 leaves with this light and dark green mottling. And these sort of maroon purplish petals here, and the sepals that are recurved here, that fold back against the stem, giving it its name of Trillium recurvatum. So this is our common in many woodlands Trillium. Also, be on the lookout soon. I've seen it in bud, and if you see some fuzzy, thin stems with opposite leaves, I said that opposite leaves going to help you cue into determining some plant species. Is our common blue phlox or woodland phlox or Phlox divaricata. And as with a lot of purple flowered species, it's I find it tough to take pictures of because sometimes you don't really capture that great sort of purple blue color of the phlox, and it can be variable. These ones in this image are very light in color, but they can also range to much more sort of deeper violet and blue purple kind of color. I'm going to start throwing out more species here, and 2 on the outside that are relatively common in woodlands across Illinois, and 1 that's not, but you can find it. You might be familiar with violets, and you think because the color violet, well, that color, that yellow, is not violet, right? So here we have this smooth yellow violet, which is blooming right now. This is a very common species in our woodlands, and so something to go out and look for. And it's not gonna be, it's gonna be scattered flowers here and there, and it's gonna blend in, and it's not always, you might step right over it. But go out there and take a look for the smooth yellow violet. And then over here, here's something in the parsley and carrot family that gets a bit taller, right? It's going to be knee height or taller, but it's going to have these delicate white flowers right now. This umbel of flowers is the sweet Sicily. This one is not quite blooming yet, but it you'll start seeing it very very soon into early May. And then the doll's eyes, so named not for the flowers that you see here, but when it sets fruit, it has these berries that are turned white and that are on sort of thick reddish stems. And at the end where the flower was born, there's actually a dark spot. So you have these white fruits with this dark spot that maybe look like eyes, or false eyes, or eyes that might go into a doll. And so this is in rich woods and nice nice bits of forests that have been protected and preserved. You're going to find these. This is it's not rare, but it's always nice when you find it going, oh, this is a great wildflower. This might be an indicator of a great woods. A couple that the wild Columbine, here's something that is you might see in a lot of different gardens, but interestingly, I don't see it a whole lot across the landscape of Illinois. It actually likes more dry woods or rocky woods, and it's kind of a short-lived perennial. It does really well, propagating by seed and needs some disturbed areas. And then another one with kind of a similar habitat, that is a true annual species, an annual wildflower, called the blue-eyed Marion. If you go out to Lodge Park or Allerton Park and areas, you might see hundreds or thousands of these blooming, right? Because as an annual species, it lives this complete life cycle in one growing season and has to come back, grow back from the seed. So here we go, right? Maybe 6 to 8 to 10 inches tall with these very distinctive blue and white petals on here. And if you do see them in mass with hundreds, they are quite spectacular. And once again, some ones to keep an eye out for because they're not as common in our area. So if you go over to Vermilion County, you might in some woods over there, some open woods, more woods edges, you might run across something called fire pink, with these bright red flowers in May. And then if you're lucky in a few places like Allerton Park and Lodge Park and others, you might get a chance to run across this nodding trillium, right? It looks like the great white trillium, except that this flower nods right through the leaves. So it is consider yourself lucky, and it's special to find this. But this other one, the swamp buttercup, right? It's blooming right now. I saw some today. This is an exceedingly common plant, in floodplain woods and in moist woods and all different types of settings. Very common. A lot of times you'll see the leaves throughout the year if you know where to look. But then this brilliant yellow buttercup flower is, it's fairly short-lived in the spring. So something to brighten your path and look for, in those wet woods, in the mid spring. As we're talking about maybe some more moist woods, rich woods and floodplains, look and you see these low growing, heart-shaped or kidney-shaped leaves, and maybe you see them en masse, right? Maybe you see hundreds of them, and you're looking at wild ginger. Now, this image here taken by one of my colleagues really shows the flowers very nicely. Most of the time, you're going to see the leaves and walk right over it and not even stop and bend down and lift up those leaves to see these really great little flowers with these 3 strap-like and pointed petals on here, kind of these maroon reddish color. A species that relies on flies to come and for pollination. Walking through some more of our oak hickory woods, our upland forests, our rich woods. Then be on the lookout for this lily family species, our large flowered bellwort. It does right with these yellow petals that are hanging down that reminds you, of a bell. As we get later, into the spring season, we'll look for the false Solomon seal, right? That has this spike of flowers on the top of the stem on these alternate ladder-like leaves, right? The true Solomon seal has flowers that actually hang down below the leaves and the stem, and blooms a little bit later. And then the Jacob's ladder here with these delicate kind of light lavender petals, and so named because it has the similar to the Solomon seal. It has the leaves that are in this massive vegetation here, which a lot of times you'll see it in. It's hard to pick out, but have those opposite leaflets on the stem that remind you of a ladder. And then I'm continuing to throw out some more woodland wildflowers, and maybe ones that are at the edge of ranges for south or north, and that are here but are not as easy to find. So with the dwarf larkspur that are in rich woods, but can more readily be found a bit further south of where we are, or the bishop's cap with these delicate stems of little white flowers in very it needs lots of moisture and a lot of beech forest and rich woods with lots of moisture, usually somewhat to the east and usually more to the north of where we are at. But in a lot of sort of drier woods, dry mesic upland oak hickory forest, you can find this little purple flowered, this violet wood sorrel, that is scattered and in our woods. So look for Oxalis violacea on your walk, or little bitty things that you may walk completely over. I throw in these two of this false mermaid weed. I threw out this scientific name earlier just because I like to say it, Florkia prosopanicoides, of the false mermaid weed. Sometimes you'll see carpets of this in moist woods, but you won't even look down to see those tiny flowers. This is these are like a half centimeter across, very tiny little white flowers. Or something that actually you might have in your yard right now. Something called spring avens. It's a species that has a stick tight seeds, so they are carried by people and animals to many places, and you have to just sort of look for these little less than a centimeter across yellow petals, and they'll be blooming very soon. So I want get out there and look and notice and see what's out there. Or if you're lucky, then I said I would also throw out some things that are not so common. Yes, there are yellow lady slipper orchids in East Central Illinois. Not common, but always a joy to find. And these will be blooming a little bit later in the spring. As I was going through wetlands and thinking about wetlands, I really came up with just two species to show you for spring bloomers. And really for skunk cabbage, I could call it a winter bloomer. Skunk cabbage has these, it's in a family that's mostly tropical, and that has this great hood right here, and you have the male and female flowers within this. This is a species that that is found in very specific habitats, saturated soils and in seeps, where it's wet and mucky all year round. And these can emerge as early as late January. I have some photos of them in the snow. They can actually generate a little bit of heat and melt the snow around it. Their strategy is like, if it's a warm day, if there's flies or other insects out, this is the only flower that they can come to and spread that pollen around. A little bit later in the spring, in those same sort of seepy areas, you might get lucky to see this Buttercup family species, the marsh, the marsh marigold. Okay, Jennifer, if you just bear with me, I'm going to keep going past past our 8 o'clock mark, and I hope other folks.
No problem, no problem. Keep trucking along.
Very, 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 very good. So if when we look at our grasslands and our prairies, there are some spring bloomers out there. There's this aster family white flowered plant here called pussy toes, because if those basal leaves are very, very fuzzy, like maybe like your cat's toes. So those are blooming right now. And then here, one of my favorites of the prairie is shooting star. And then you're going to look at that picture and say, "Oh, Jamie, but that doesn't look like a prairie. I see lots of trees in the background." Well, this is a species of open woods and woodlands and savannas and the prairie. There are actually some great masses of them in woods in Vermilion County, particularly along the Salt Fork and the Middle Fork and the Vermilion River drainages, but also it's at Lotus Cemetery Prairie Nature Preserve and other prairies, and my friend Don Gardner has great masses of it in his prairie reconstruction up in Ford County. And so shooting stars, I do consider them a grassland and a woodland to prairie species. So here's a couple that you're going to have to, you're not going to be able to walk out into any prairie, and particularly probably not in very many prairie restorations or reconstructions, and find. And that's the Hoary Cocoon, with these brilliant orange flowers. But if you go to Prospect Cemetery Prairie or Loda, or some of our unplowed prairie remnants, you can find them. Or this one of my favorites, very interesting, and this one is blooming right now. I saw some blooming yesterday, which is wood betony, and also sometimes called lousewort. And it does have the wood. It is one of those species that you can find also in open woodlands as well. So it's happy in open woodlands and all the way through into prairies as well. It is also very interesting in that it is a partially parasitic plant. It is a hemiparasite, meaning so it does have these. It's low growing. That this spike is maybe sometimes six to eight inches tall, with these yellow flowers in the spring, and it has kind of these maybe described as a fern-like leaves, and they are green and photosynthetic, and it does produce its own food, but it also its roots can form connections with other plants and actually draw some water and nutrients from other plants around it as well. So it has some very interesting habits in the prairies and the woodlands. One of my favorites is wild strawberry. That is perfectly at home, in open woods, but also in the open prairie as well. It's really great to see sometimes dozens or hundreds of these little white flowers, and when the fruits ripen in June, they are absolutely delicious. They're no bigger than your fingernail, but they're really wonderful, and it's something a real treat when you're out in the right areas in the prairie. And then these golden Alexanders, you can find some of them are in bud right now, so maybe into May. Here's this carrot and parsley family plant, right? That can be fairly low growing sometimes, 8 inches to a foot, but sometimes over a foot tall. That adds some amazing color right here to the prairies, and also really important plant for insects as well, particularly our native bees and our native bees that are flying early, to provide them with some nectar and pollen. And here I am going with these, putting the wild hyacinth, something that is not uncommon, but not readily found if you're going out, looking for the species called wild hyacinth. It's at home in our prairies, in our open prairies, but also in our savannas and in open woodlands as well. So in May, we'll have this wonderful spike, sometimes a foot to 18 inches tall, with with these long strap-like, lily-like leaves. And a lot of times you'll not just see one or two, but maybe you'll see dozens or even hundreds blooming at once. And then, similar to the woodland phlox, the blue phlox, we also have our Phlox Pylosa, our prairie phlox, that adds that wonderful dash of pink color, more pink, sort of that pink purple, in our prairies in May. And then I'm going to throw out some ones that are a little are less common as well, or species specific. So a great legume, a plant that's in the bean and pea family, the cream wild indigo that blooms in our prairie remnants in some of our reconstructions in May. And then if you go to our areas, our sand areas, they're going to have yet another phlox. If you head north up into the northern parts of Iroquois County, or head west over to Mason County along the Illinois River, you could find this cleft phlox that will be blooming in profusion very soon. And then if this low-growing plant called the white blue-eyed grass, this one is not blue-eyed and it's not a grass. But it is amazing to find. Very low growing right here. It's about 6 to 8 inches high, that we can find in some of our prairie plantings and our remnants, and a real joy to find the white blue-eyed grass on the prairie. And I'd be remiss if we weren't looking at some of our what we might call some of our waste places, all right? Our yards and fields and roadsides, and we could do a whole lecture on just some of those weedy things. And so once again, a little mustard at the edges of parking lots and sidewalks, but these little teeny tiny flowers that will make you stop and look and get down low, and here's this dime, right, for a measurement and some comparison that my colleague Connie Cunningham took this picture of this early whitlow grass that's blooming right now. And I particularly wanted to put this next species in here, this butterweed, and it's showing this, this is an annual species, it's a native species, and it does well when it's carried by water, or when soil is disturbed by water. And you see this one spike of these sort of yellow flowers, and it's just starting to flower right now. But this is also one that will get into agricultural fields. So sometimes if we have a wet spring and a field doesn't get worked, and it will be acres, not maybe tens of acres, maybe 100 acres of this, of thousands of butterweed, coating the field yellow. I'm guessing the farmer. I think it's beautiful. I'm guessing the farmer who owns that field may not think so. But a lot of times you'll see those masses of yellows, and then it's going to be butterweed. And so I'm going to talk about the dead nettle first, because then also I'm seeing this right now in some farm fields. You'll see, instead of yellow, that's maybe a foot to 2 feet tall, maybe you'll see 6 to 8 inches tall purple out in the farm fields, in some farm fields right now. And that's this little guy right here, this Lamium purpureum. And then the other one on the left is something that might vex some homeowners in their yard, what we might call ground ivy or creeping Charlie, right? With these little rounded, round tooth leaves on it. But if you look closely, and it's a mint family species. It's really gorgeous. It's this little cute little purple flower and I took this picture last Friday, and so it's blooming right now. If you just stop it and take a look. Something that's not quite blooming yet, and I want to put in there as those last two species were non-native, and we have some non-natives that are invasive in the mustard family, right? Our garlic mustard, and the Forest Preserve District will be having some work days to pull garlic mustard. And this other little cute one right here with these little white flowers, and this is the Cleavers, or sometimes called bedstraw. And it's something that also will be in your yard. It's native, it's in the woods, it's in disturbed areas, it's an annual, it's in your yard. You, like as kids, you could pick it up and stick it on your friend's shirt, because it has these little recurved hairs on it that clings like Velcro. So I like to notice some of these little out of the way flowers as well. And then we're almost finished with our flowers now. And very soon, actually just getting started this week, is this non-native, another yellow non-native that you might see along the roadsides and in fields, is our yellow rocket. And then, Jennifer, you know the state flower of Illinois, right? Is our common,
of course.
Yeah, our common blue violet. It's in our yards, and it is native. It's in our road, it's in yards and roadsides, and it is blooming in profusion right now. So go out and look for the common blue violet. Well, now that you've seen many pictures of these spring wildflowers, where to go? Where should you go? Of course, start with our Champaign County forest preserves. If you go out to Homer Lake, there's some great sites. There's Flickers Woods, Collins Pond, and Hidden Acres. If you go up to the Middle Fork Preserve at the north end of the county, there's a great spot called Patton Woods. And out at Lake of the Woods, go to the Rayburn Purnell and Riverview Retreat area. I live in Urbana, and so I love our Urbana Park District. And so Busey Woods on the north side of Urbana has a great place to see spring wildflowers. And if you're going to head east from Champaign County, I would head to properties owned by the Vermilion County Conservation District. So there's a great prairie reconstruction at Forest Glen, named after the woman who actually started that restoration. Her name was Doris Westfall. There's a great beech maple, Mesic Woods, Russell Duffin Woods. There's some seeps over there. These small, interesting wetlands. Kennecott County Park over in Vermilion County. Also, there's a couple of nature preserves, Horseshoe Bottoms and Windfall Prairie. Our Department of Natural Resources does a great job of with our state parks and fish and wildlife areas. So head over there to Kickapoo. There is one nature preserve that's really great within Kickapoo State Park. If you're going to head north from Champaign-Urbana, there's two prairie remnants that are some of my favorite in the world. Prospect Cemetery Prairie Nature Preserve next to the town of Paxton, and then Loda Cemetery Prairie Nature Preserve up near Loda, Illinois. And if you're going to continue to go further north, check out the Iroquois County Conservation Area and also the Hoover Branch Savannah Nature Preserve up there. Once again, heading west, there's areas where to see these spring wildflowers at Moraine View State Park. I'm very happy with, I actually sort of crowdsourced some of this list as well. I reached out to the Illinois Botany Group on Facebook, and many people suggested the Merwin Preserve that's owned by a land trust called the Parklands Foundation that's north of Bloomington. And I've been there myself. It's along the Mackinac River, and it's beautiful. A little bit closer, heading out Interstate 72 by Monticello is Lodge Park. There is a few acres in Lodge Park that has an amazing show and very diverse show of spring woodland wildflowers. It's on the edge of the Sangamon River floodplain at Lodge Park. So go to Lodge Park like this week. And then also another local land trust, the Land Conservation Foundation, owns Brady Woods and Metler Woods in the Sangamon River watershed and over by Clinton. And then our University of Illinois Allerton Park. Many of you are hopefully familiar with Allerton Park, and they have a great show. At the Springfield Park District owns a park on the north side of town called Carpenter Park. That's a great place to go. Continuing heading west, right? There's Sandridge State Forest is really great. The Revis Hill Prairie. And then also in my homeland area of Peoria, and in Peoria County is the Jubilee College State Park and Jubilee Forest Nature Preserve. One of my favorite areas to go see spring woodland wildflowers, and I will contend is one of the best places as far as abundance and diversity, is over at Funk's Grove in McLean County to the south and west of Bloomington and Normal. The Thaddeus Stubblefield Grove is just amazing in the spring. And then if you're in the Peoria area, check out, the Peoria Park District owns Detweiler Woods, and there's actually some really great hill prairies in the bluffs above the Illinois River. At Peoria. Head south, not too far south into Douglas County, is down the Ombra River is the Walnut Point State Park, for a great show of spring woodland wildflowers. And I am a longtime member and volunteer with a land trust and conservation organization called Grand Prairie Friends, and we own over 1,000 acres of a forest between Charleston and Fox Ridge State Park that we call the Warbler Ridge Conservation Area, and it is brimming with wildflowers right now. And if you continue down the road, going to Fox Ridge State Park or Lincoln Trail, or a friend suggested Hidden Springs, or Spittler Woods over by Decatur. These are great places. And then also in that Decatur area is the Macon County Conservation District, the Rock Springs Conservation Area. So that's all I have tonight. There's so much. So I think
there's so much.
Jennifer, I thank you and the Champaign County Forest Preserve District for inviting me and allowing me to talk and show some pictures about spring wildflowers and where to see some of them. So
yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much as well, Jamie, for going through a very comprehensive list of all of the different species that you can see here. And I really like that you included not only just woodland, but you also included some prairie, and you included some, that you'll see now, some that you can still have a chance to see later in the spring.
Mhm.
There's always something going on. So thank you so much for going through all of that. And just so everybody knows, this program will be available to watch later on our Facebook page, on this Facebook page, and on our YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and revisit any of the information that was talked about here, you are able to do that at your own at your leisure, where you can write down, those different field guides that you mentioned, and some of those different places that you mentioned to visit as well. So if anyone has any questions, you can definitely type them into the chat right now. We did have a question earlier where someone
Mm.
asked if May apples could be transplanted, and then someone answered in the comments and said yes. But I don't know, Jamie, do you have anything else to say about that?
Did they provide any other information or just say yes?
Nope, they just said May
Okay.
apples can be transplanted. So
Yeah, because they're actually not right. They're not terribly deeply rooted, right? So that stem's going to go down and right then you have a rhizome and you have these clonals. So yes, you're going to just have to dig down and make sure and find out where that root makes its turn, whether it's 6 or 8 inches down in the soil. But of course, I'm going to if you're transplanting from your friend's yard or your own yard, that's great. But obviously, please don't go out into our forest preserves or area in places and dig up wildflowers. Just to have in your yard. But yeah, there are definitely. I have some May apples in my yard that I've gotten um, from friends in the past. So yes, May apples can be transplanted.
good to know. Good to know. Yeah. I saw some today as well. And like you said, that's one that's really good to start with your identification, because
Mhm,
when it's
mhm.
first coming up out of the ground, it looks kind of strange. But once it opens up, it's a really, really interesting plant.
The
Oh,
yeah, the umbrella is not unfurled yet, right? It's just
no. Yeah. It just looks like a weird looking little knob.
right,
Um,
right,
Yeah, so we have a lot of people saying thank you. It's been a great, informative presentation,
right. My pleasure.
and that they really enjoyed it. Um, Someone asked, "What is the cat's name?" The cat, her name is Phoebe. So yep, she's been in and out the whole time. So thanks for tolerating that. And actually, right now, one thing that you can do is we have at Homer Lake Forest Preserve, we have a self-guided wildflower walk set up along Flicker Woods Trail, which is one of the places that Jamie you mentioned. And so if you want a little bit more help with identifying and learning just a little bit more interesting tidbits about some of the plants, a lot of them that you talked about today, I strongly encourage you to visit that area. The self-guided wildflower walk trail will be up until the end of April. But we also have information and brochures and everything like that on our websites. So, um, yeah, let's see what else we've got. Any other questions? Where do you purchase wildflowers? Someone asked, where can you purchase them? Jamie, what
Well,
could you recommend?
so here in Champaign-Urbana, Grand Prairie Friends
Mm-hmm.
does have a spring native plant sale. It is mostly prairie plants this year. It's going to be There's going to be pre-orders online. So I would
Mm-hmm.
suggest doing going to the Grand Prairie Friends website for more information about that. And there's been some local people, John Marlin and some others who have grown some and offered some for sale, in the past. But I would look up some of those, look up some of the reputable vendors online. There are some, that will actually ship live plants. A lot of them that will ship seeds. One is Prairie Moon Nursery. They have their roots in
Mm-hmm.
Illinois, but they're in kind of Minnesota, so Prairie Moon is good. Possibility Place Nursery up at Monier, Illinois, up in Will County. They grow a lot of great native trees and shrubs, but they also grow a lot of other native wildflowers as well. No, it's and if you're right here in Champaign-Urbana, or even it's tough. There are not a lot of our local vendors or nurseries that offer the native plants, for sale. But for check out Grand Prairie Friends, check out Prairie Moon and Possibility Place.
Yeah, definitely. Those are all really great suggestions. And the plant sale pre-orders are going on. Are they going on now, or are they going to be going on soon?
Soon. I think it's
Soon.
May 1st or May 2nd.
Yeah.
It'll be going live. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So definitely check out their website for more information about that plant sale. And like you said, Prairie Moon Nursery is a great resource as well. All right. So let's see if we've got any other questions. We've got some comments about the trail that's labeled at Homer Lake Forest Preserve.
Great.
So
Great.
yeah, so there's plenty to do, plenty of places to go and see around here. Whether, he gave you so much information, whether you want to go north or south or east or west or visit all of the above. I have a huge list of new places that I want to visit now. A lot of those places I've been to, but a lot of them I've never even heard of before. So I definitely have some plans for places that I need to visit and plants that I need to look for. We talked about a lot that I actually was not familiar with. So it's very exciting. So I will go ahead and let us wrap this up. If you do have questions later, you can always add them into the comment section on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll still see them and we'll answer them when we can. Jamie has his contact information right there, so feel free to contact him directly if you have any questions specifically for him or about any of the information that was discussed today. And thank you everyone for sticking with us tonight. I know we went just a little bit over, but I think it was worth it. We needed to know all of that information. And I really hope that you all can get out and enjoy some of the nice spring weather that we've been having this week and see some of these spring wildflowers while you can, because it's definitely worth taking the trip and spending the time.
Yeah, that's the most. Thank you, Jennifer. That's I forgot to mention, right? The most important thing is, get outside, enjoy, share that enjoyment with others.
Definitely. That's what it's all about. Awesome. Well, and thank you again, Jamie, for everything that you have discussed tonight. And we will end it there, and we'll see you all again next time. Thank you.
Okay. Good night.